When I became conscious again, I did not know I was in Africa. But then I was shot by one to be saved by many. Just as I was about to lean into the source that created me, I heard my mama's voice singing a calling song, calling me back to my body. Her song reminded me I had not yet done my purpose, which is to sing to others, just as she was singing to me. I came back to live that purpose.
I'm here with Robin Landsong. She has an amazing NDE, and she recently wrote a book called Loving Bravely, a memoir, Miraculous Near Death of a Girl Abducted, Shot During War, and Sung Back to Life by an African Woman. So welcome, Robin. How are you?
I am good today. How about yourself?
I'm great. So you were abducted when you were 8 years old and taken to Rhodesia. You actually met SHIVA during your experience, and that's something unusual. So how did this start? How did you get abducted when you were 8 years old?
So 1977 on the East Coast of America. And so to give people context, this is post-Vietnam War. This is before child protection services are actually established in the United States. This is before there's any government system in place around abducted children. So 1977, those things were just being begun to be drafted, but they weren't in place yet. So I was growing up in a home, like many people, where there'd been the generational disruption on caring for your children. And so when there's war, oppression, poverty, alcoholism, prior abuse, then we come into families where they've lost that compassion, that natural urge to protect their children. And so I was growing up in a home like that, and one of the people in the neighborhood spotted me as an unprotected child, watched that I walked home from school, and just came at the end of the school year, end of the school day, and got me. And I immediately knew that my life was in danger and that this man was quite mentally ill and quite capable of killing me at any moment. So it was a very intense need to draw on my intuition and figure out, what do I need to be in this situation to survive this man's mental illness and violence? So I was drugged. He took me out of the country. People often ask how, and I say 1977 quite easily. There's still so much problem with child trafficking and human trafficking, and for a very intimidating man that people literally stepped back from. I don't know the exact things because I was drugged, but the numbers of children who are abducted and taken away from homes or taken out of the country is astonishing in that time period. So when I became conscious, I did not know where I was. I did not have the context of the history that the Rhodesian War had been going on for many years. And it took him taking me to a food market before I realized that I was in Africa. And I was seeing, the people who had the blackest skin I'd ever seen. I was hearing a language I didn't understand. And I was seeing people dressed in clothes. And then I finally made the connection. Again, I was raised in America. And so it reminded me of what I'd seen in National Geographic. And that's the moment that I put it together, that he had abducted me all the way from America to Africa. And I certainly didn't know what part I was in. So I ended up being assaulted by him, and eventually he gave me to another man, and that man lost me in the bush. He just kind of didn't bother to take care of me. So there I was, 8 years old, in the bush, at the height of a civil war, and my chances of survival with the research I've done were really nothing. And what happened is that some very extreme soldiers picked me up. I thought that was going to be my last moment alive. They were fully armed. One of the soldiers, he took me out of there. So he didn't need to. I wasn't of his race. I wasn't of his nationality. But he had that innate father instinct to protect a child who was alone. So he took a risk. He could have been killed by the other soldiers because he went against, what they wanted. He took me out of there and he dropped me off near a village. And I spent the night in a tree by myself. I didn't understand the risk of that being in a tree, that hyenas, leopards, all kinds of things could have gotten me. But so many people say, oh, divine grace was looking over you. Because again, there's just multiple times that I could have died and that would have been the end of me. So I was taken in by the people of this village, and the women sang to me. And one woman in particular, she welcomed me in with the singing. The children welcomed me in with story. And so they probably hadn't seen a white child before. And so their welcome me in was an incredibly generous act. And so again, I just want to paint this critical moment in my life. I had been raised in a family where I wasn't receiving parenting. I hadn't received mothering. And so I'd been assaulted. All my life was threatened. So when I arrived in this village and this woman began singing to me, I literally melted into her arms because I could sense the caring. I could sense the nurturing. And so my singing is different than hers, but she opened in me the ability to listen to the song in the land and the song that people are born with. So each of us are born with a song. And in some cultures, we remember to try and sing that song back to people. So I'm going to sing just as she sang to me and really focus on your audience and your people and what needs to be sung to today. Shune ya yo, eyam ya yo, iya yo wo, eyam yo. And I love to get curious. Where does that, for people it's resonant for, they might feel something in their body, feel something in their emotions stirring. And what I'm doing when I'm singing is I'm saying, you're real, you matter. It's important that you were born, and may I have the privilege of singing your song to you. So continuing on, I was taken in by these people. I was given a naming ceremony. I was being taught the songs. And in the naming ceremony, they called me Shai. And the kind of precursor greeting for a girl is I. So I interpreted my name as Aisha. So that has become my name. And that's more of a Northern African name. But again, it was my interpretation as an 8-year-old trying to make sense of the language Venda. So I was giving a naming ceremony, and I thought, this is my new life. I forgot that I was white. There was no mirrors around. I was starting to learn the language just by gesture and context. And one day I went to the creek. That was a positive thing for me because the women had put clay on where I'd been assaulted by the abductor and to heal my wound. And they sang to me and they called me to sing back with them. And when I could sing back with them, they considered me well. And so what happened next is when I went back to that creek by myself, unbeknownst to me, a battle was starting and a soldier was scouting the perimeter. And I've gathered this through going back and doing research and getting other people's accounts of what happened. And so he immediately drew up his gun. I'm an undefended child out by myself. And I'm so close I can see him pull the trigger. And when he pulled the trigger, the bullet grazed the top of my head, blew me off my feet. I slammed down to the ground, and I began to rise up. And so I was watching my body down on the ground, and it was very messy with blood. And I was watching the lights go out. I could see through my skin, and I was watching my heart get slower and slower until it entirely dimmed out. And then I was brought down from that perspective from above into my heart, and it felt like a collapsing room that I wanted out of. And so I was transported very quickly to another place. And the relief that happened from dying, of no longer having to defend my life, no longer having to watch out for, where's the danger? I was suddenly totally held more than I had ever been on this human plane. And so that's part of what so many near-deathers love to share their experience, is to reassure people that no matter what your experience is during your time to cross, that you will be held, that there is divine grace in many different forms. And so again, I'm 8. I'm greeted by 2 women, and they're again so nurturing, and they're showing me that I could go home to the great source, the source that sung me into being. And so I'm still attached to my family, my newfound African family. And so I kind of start searching again for them, and that draws me away from that experience where I could go the easy path. And again, this is some of my art behind me that I've drawn. And this is, in the center, you can see there's so much of my art has something that's a center point, a circle, a web of life. And that's repeated through my art. Because that's what I was shown next, is that we are all connected in this web of life, and that each of us are like a living gem. And we can connect to each other through radiating out through compassionate heart. And so I'm dropping in right now, radiating some compassion to say, I see you, and that all of us have some kind of difficulty. Mine happens to be a very extreme story, but everyone has some loss, some disappointment, some abandonment, some woundedness that we're all working to recover from. And if we can extend that compassionate, loving heart to one another, then we strengthen the web of life. So our love makes a huge difference. So I met many beings. They helped purify my heart so that I could be ready and able to receive the magnitude of the love that's available from what I call the Great Heart. And again, the Great Heart is the source that sung me into existence.
Can you tell me a bit about these beings that you met?
So one of the beings I met, I call my royal shepherd. And his face was narrow, he had a beard and a sheep herder staff. I was not raised Christian. I just met him as an 8-year-old. I call him my royal shepherd. And he touched his forehead to mine, and again, that's when I could see the great web of life. And what he was showing me is that I have choice, that I could choose to go on and become part of the universe again, reincarnate as another being, or I could come back to this lifetime. And the next being I met, again, these kind of almost kind of jellyfish-like creatures that went through me and took away any of the shame that I had, the confusion. Another being I met, I call my guide, and he again showed me that there was nothing wrong with me that made the abuse happen, that it was the confusion of adults that they abused me, like the abductor. And so he purified any thoughts that I was unworthy, that I was less than, that there was something wrong with me. And when I understood that, he took me out to see this great night sky. And in that night sky, I could see that all the stars are like living relatives, and that we are made of the same ingredients of stars, of earth, and that the best thing that we can do is cherish and honor this physical body by feeding ourselves well, feeding ourselves whole food, so that we're eating purity from the earth, from the sun. And that to honor our physical body by eating well, by taking care of our exercise, we are honoring the divine source that created us. So again, I moved on. I met another being just before I was about to merge into the source that created me. I began to hear singing. And it was my mama, my African mama. She had found my lifeless body, stopped the blood flow, and she had changed her wailing into singing. And she called on the ancestors in the land to sing a calling song so strong that I would hear it on the other side of the veil. And again, I'm going to sing something like what the ancestors and my mama were singing to call me back to life. Oh, way high, oh, yo, oh, I am, oh. And so their singing awakened my memory that I had not yet done my purpose, which is to sing to people, to call them home to themselves, to call home lost parts, compressed parts, hidden parts, just as they were doing for me. So I turned around in the tunnel. I came back. And before I came back to my body, I met two more beings. And one told me, we have many art images for you. You are to draw image after image to remind people of their divine connection, and that no matter what has happened in your life, you are an essential part of the web of life. And so she said, it'll be very hard when you go back. There'll be much danger. So we will hold on to these drawings until you are safe enough to begin to draw one right after the other. And I continued on, and just at the bridge between the living and the dead, the final veil, I met another being that I consider the grandmother of all of us. And she said to me again, it's going to be so difficult when you go back. So let me fortify you with some vitality, with some life. And again, she sang inside me as if I was a cathedral, and she was singing a song of prayer. Shomne ya ye, showe ya ya, owe I am, owe. And with that, she released me back, and I came back to my body. I felt so fragile, so weak, and my African mama, Mamiatan, was holding me, took me back to the village, and they laid plants on me and did prayer to get the hatred that came with the bullet off my body, so I did not go through life with resentment and bitterness. Again, they cared for me. I was very weak. There is no hospital in this story. Again, this is rural Zimbabwe at the height of the Civil War. This is dirt roads. This is no vehicles. And the hospital is very far away. So they just did their best to care for me, and their love is what really brought me back. Unfortunately, the soldiers came back attacked the village. And when we were escaping with another mother, she was shot from behind. I was on her hip. We both fell down to the ground. That started my bleeding again. And she yelled at me to keep going. And so I followed her instructions. I ran as far as I could, which wasn't very far, like about maybe 30 feet. I collapsed face forward in the sand, and I had a second death experience. And this is where I met Shiva. And my whole world had just been destroyed. So I thought this was my new family. And Shiva, as you know, is the god of creation and destruction. And so to be in his presence, I could feel his power, but I knew he also loved me. And so what he showed me was two land masses colliding together through his force, and that he could make two land masses into a new mountain. But then he showed me the mountain also gets destroyed, grain by grain, landslides to make the beach. So what he was teaching me was out of destruction makes new creation, that when things are broken apart, when we have a moment in our lives where we think we're never going to be able to make it through, what we thought was reliable, what we thought was steady, what we thought was our source of love and our needs being met, is in pieces on the ground, and we are broken down. He is there to say we are broken open. And so he returned me back to life, and he said, you are part of new creation. You cannot understand that now, but I do. So he returned me to life. I didn't want to go on, but he commanded me to crawl forward away from the massacre to a well where he knew that another woman was going to come for water in the morning for that well. So I was found by a woman named Mia Lucy, and she put me on her back as if I was her own child. I was kind of half dead. She washed the blood off my face. She took me back to her homestead, and when people saw that she had a wounded white child, they said, don't bother with her. It's too dangerous if you're caught with her. And they were right. But she said, and again, these are the people I have to thank for not being one of the casualties in that war, because my research says 24,000 civilians died in that war. The reason I am not one of them is because she said, she's a living human being. I will not throw her away. So she hid me. She took care of me. She ended up getting me across the Limpopo River, gave me to a white farming family in South Africa. I had another death experience because my wound got infected, and I was really dying of lack of love. You know, they fed me, but they weren't singing to me. They weren't touching me. So I began dying again. That was a very brief experience. I just kind of rose above my body. They found me, took me to a hospital that gave me penicillin. From there, they figured out that I was American because I couldn't understand Afrikaans, which is the Dutch settlers' language. And there I was taken by an agent back to the US, given back to my family, which was might sound like a good thing, but because they were such a lost souls themselves, they were quite abusive. And so it was really quite devastating to go from being with the Black Africans who were very loving, sang to me, gave me a name, to all of a sudden being in a family that their capacity for loving kindness was really non-existent. And when I began to try and speak of what happened to me, my mother had no capacity to hear it. She hit me across the face. Remember, I have a brain injury. I'm just recovering from all this trauma. She said, don't ever speak of this again. So I didn't. And so many people can relate to having to stuff down their emotional experience, their spiritual experience, and not be able to tell the truth in a family that has no capacity for the truth. So I suppressed it all. In teen years, my body just became, literally started dying from the stress. There's you can actually die from too much cortisol in your body. My heart was giving out. I had to be resuscitated multiple times and actually had several more death experiences. And I got away from my family and I began my healing process. And I began my healing when I was like 19. I went to inpatient trauma treatment units. And just that's all I could do from my 20s into my 30s is just do trauma resolution. At about 35, I was able to start giving back to others and getting training so that I could help others in their healing process and use my intuition that can see inside bodies. So I see organs, I see brain, I see nervous system, and I see people's emotional story, that how that relates to their physical health. So I love figuring out underlying cause that might be mystery illnesses, or I also love working with attachment trauma and trauma resolution and helping people revive their commitment to being alive in this physical body on this plane at this time.
When did you realize that you had had a near-death experience, or when did you start studying this matter?
I had to really do a lot of my trauma resolution before I could get to the near-death experiences. So it's sort of like the queue was all full of traumatic experiences until I could start to unearth the loving experiences, the being sung to, and really remembering in detail. I never totally forgot the death experiences. I suppressed all the details, but it's sort of like a buried treasure with like a little flag sticking up, that I kind of knew it was there, but I couldn't articulate it because there was nobody safe to tell. So once I began to do my healing process and I was able to unbury the layers of trauma, then there was this gem of all my death experiences and all the loving experiences and being sung to that was also right there. So one of the reasons I love to encourage people to do their trauma healing work is because you get to open up the joy, open up the breath of life, open up the embodiment so that you can come home to yourself, have your self-connection, increase your self-compassion, and be able to increase your relationships with the land, with other people, with your creativity, with your voice. So there's so many benefits in doing our healing work, as you know, that's my big message, is commit to your next step of your healing process.
What about your relationship with Shiva? When did you realize that he was Shiva? And did you continuously maintain this communication with him, or did you drop it and pick it up later?
I was so suppressed and numb that I couldn't hear very much on a spiritual and emotional level. So the more I did my unveiling, I like to call it, through like every bodywork session, every massage I would get, then that would help increase my access to be able to spiritually hear. So again, that's why embodiment's so important. So again, it's all from 8-year-old perspective. I just called him my royal shepherd. People might call him Jesus. And it wasn't until I was looking through pictures, Hindu stories, that I saw a picture of Shiva and read his qualities that I made this connection. I mean, it was like this moment where I just sat there for 20 minutes completely shocked of like, oh my God, that was Shiva. Because it was such a direct relationship. I didn't have a name. I'm Caucasian. I was raised in a very conservative place in the East Coast. I was exposed to nothing Hindu. So that makes the point to me, of reincarnation, of lifetimes, that I knew him from other lifetimes. And otherwise I had no way of being with this, even conceiving of this being. But it was what I needed after the massacre. I needed the potency and power of him. And he works through me. And so that's a really important point, is that the presences, they need us to be the hollow bone. They need us to be as clear as possible so that they can do their work through us. Again, I'm a single person, but the magnitude of what I create through my artwork, through the singing medicine, it's the potency of the beings that come through me. It's not about Robin. It's when I'm giving a session or when I'm singing, it's not me, it's them. And so all I have to do is take good care of myself so I can be the clearest channel that I can be. And that is saying thank you for my life. Thank you for working through me. And like the results that happen when I work with people or sing to them are, it's humbling, it's surprising. I can sing to people and they can have a shift in 4 minutes that they had been working on for years, because compassion and singing are huge medicine.
You went back to Africa to help remember what you had experienced. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so it took years to find where I had been and find some people. So that's all in my book about how that happened. It's a very long, intricate story, but I'll just kind of get to a nutshell of the important piece. We found exactly where I was. We found people who remembered me, and who had taken care of me after I was shot. And I was able to go back and reunite with the granddaughter of Mia Lucy, who's the woman who saved my life after the massacre. And literally, our meeting was totally divinely orchestrated. She knew we were coming. There was some people who picked us up from the airport and were bringing us in to that exact area. And she happened to be coming out that day to go get supplies in the bigger city. And so our reunion was spontaneous. And fortunately, we have it all on film. So you can go to my YouTube channel and find my book trailer video, and there's the reunion of Mayamu and I. So we literally ran to each other and held each other, and she rocked me and she said, sorry, sorry, sorry. And then the incredible thing happened. We purposely told no one where I was shot, so that when we got there, we would know that it was authentically somebody who knew me then, if they knew where I was shot. So she immediately bent my head down to check and see that where I had been shot had healed well. And so that was the greatest moment of validation of my life, like the healing that happened for me in that moment. Because again, my family, they never wanted me to talk about it. My parents are deceased. They never did ask me. I'm estranged from my siblings. They are unwilling to know about it. And so her validation, she went through that war with me. She had her own experiences of war. So to have her bend down and check that I was okay in the exact spot, I can't even describe the level of healing that was for me. And again, we were like sisters. We just reunited. We were inseparable. We were just touching each other and just being with each other that whole visit. And I got to do ceremony with them. And the second time I went back 2 years later, we did ceremony, and I received a vision, because they allowed me, which is very unusual for a white person to be allowed in the ceremony, but I dropped down from the drumming and the singing and had a vision. And in that vision, I was shown kind of a giant thorn in the side of humanity. And the ancestors told me, take the thorn out of the side of humanity. And I said, I don't know how. And they said, stop disowning your power. Put your hand out, do your job, take the thorn out of the side of humanity. So I put my hand out, drew my hand back, the thorn came out. And I looked at it and I said, what is this thorn made of? And they said, us versus them thinking. Thinking that somebody is less, thinking that somebody is superior. The ways that we divide each other from race, from gender, from nationality, making one person less than and one person superior. They said, equality is your assignment. And I said, oh my God, that's a huge problem. How am I going to solve that problem? And they said, we didn't say you're going to do it alone. You're going to join with people and find ways to help people remember that we are all equal. No one is less, no one is more. We're equal human beings needing compassion, needing belonging, and that belonging is a basic human need. To be welcomed in, to be seen, is essential for our psychological and physical health.
Where can people buy your book, or where can they read more about you?
Again, so it's Loving Bravely, a memoir. There is another book called Loving Bravely, so look for this cover with the elephants. So I did the audiobook myself, and I sang in it. So when I say my mama sang, then they're singing. And so it's on Audibles, and then the physical or the Kindle book is on all the platforms. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all booksellers. And to connect with me, I do at this time, we'll see if I can, how long I can keep it up with, if I get to bigger projects, like maybe making a film out of this book. I do individual sessions, groups, and classes, and you can find me on my website. So it's my name, robinlandsong.com. And you can look up more videos about me. Again, I have classes. My art is available in all different kinds of forms. And I try to make my art affordable, because sometimes art can be very expensive and just available to few people. So that's why I make it on printed on these towels, mugs. So I want it to be usable in people's lives. I also have a music album called Roots Drinking Rain. And so that also is on Spotify, iTunes, all kinds of places, as well as my website.
Loving Bravely, the miraculous near death of an 8-year-old American girl. When I became conscious again, I did not know I was in Africa. But then I was shot by one to be saved by many. Just as I was about to lean into the source that created me, I heard my mama's voice singing a calling song, calling me back to my body. Her song reminded me I had not yet done my purpose, which is to sing to others, just as she was singing to me. I came back to live that purpose.
This has been the A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.